Alright, today the movie is Superman 2, released on June 19th, 1981. Welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews, covering one unsystematically chosen movie at a time. I will also be discussing the Richard Donner cut of this film, which was released on November 28th, 2006, in conjunction with the premiere of the movie Superman Returns the same year. Directed by Richard Donner / Richard Lester. For the cast, we have Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, Christopher Reeve as Clark Kent / Superman, Margot Kidder as Lois Lane, Terrence Stamp as General Zod, and Marlon Brando as Jor-El in the Donner cut only. For the plot synopsis, the three Kryptonian criminals banished by Jor-El to the Phantom Zone shortly after Superman was born are accidentally freed and come to Earth to take over. Alright guys, let's just dive right into this motherfucking backstory. So Superman 2 was originally shot concurrently with the first Superman film released in 1978 by Richard Donner. He had finished roughly 75% of the movie before production was halted to promote the first movie. Richard Donner was an exceptional director. He used big budgets and often fell behind schedule. Executive producers Alexander and Ilya Salkind enjoyed the success of the first film, but did not care for the open checkbook approach that Donner had while shooting. Ultimately, they fired Donner from Superman 2 by telegram while he was promoting the first movie and replaced him with Richard Lester, whose biggest claim to fame at that point was directing the comedy films A Hard Day's Night and Help in the 1960s, which both starred the Beatles. Because Donner had already shot so much of Superman 2 and refused to share credit with Lester, Lester was forced to reshoot many scenes to take full credit as director of the film. The Salkinds opted to have Lester reshoot existing scenes and add a few new key sequences, including an entirely new intro at the Eiffel Tower. Because there was a 2-year gap between shooting Donner and Lester's scenes, this choice resulted in several continuity errors present in the theatrical cut. One notable difference was the choice to remove Marlon Brando's scenes due to the disputes over his right to portions of the US box office gross. Ultimately, the theatrical version of Superman 2 with Lester credited as director was still fairly well received, although watching it now with the backstory does shine a light on some of the strange things that I previously never noticed. When I saw the Donner cut for the first time, I was blown away. They say 6 tons of footage shot by Donner for the first 2 movies was found in a vault in England. Ultimately, they were forced to use about 20% of Lester's footage for the Donner cut, as well as splicing together some dicier, previously unshot scenes to maintain the flow of the story, and a lot of those do stand out as having a little shoddier production value. As far as the actual movie, one thing that's crazy about a lot of sequels in this era is that home video was not commonplace yet, so we get this lengthy recap of the first movie to refresh the minds of theater audiences. As I mentioned, the movie focuses on the 3 Kryptonian villains who were banished to the Phantom Zone at the start of the first film. Despite Terrence Stamp delivering a great performance as being what I consider a top-tier villain in General Zod, it seems the inclusion of Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor in this film was a result of wanting to keep a household name to draw in viewers, and he probably could have been written out of this story, in my opinion. Between the 2 cuts, you could argue the stories generally follow similar timelines and events, but personally I think the tone of the Donner cut is much more serious and well executed, while Lester's version is more lighthearted and silly in any of the scenes where he made his mark when he took over. The first act of this movie focuses a lot on Lois Lane theorizing that Clark Kent is actually Superman's alter ego, despite him obviously going to great lengths to prove her wrong. This arc is delivered on much more efficiently in the Donner cut, with many of the more relevant scenes driving home a much bigger impact. I don't want to ignore how brilliant Christopher Reeve played both Superman and Clark Kent as 2 believably different characters in all 4 movies he was in, very much selling the secret identity to the audience. This movie really set the tone for future superhero sequels to up the ante with regard to the stakes of the previous films. We go from the climax in the original Superman, having him try and stop 2 rockets from striking opposite ends of the US, to having him face off with 3 formidable foes who all have the same superpowers as him. I mentioned that the 2 films start off with completely different intro scenes, but they also have 2 completely different endings. I won't give anything away, but they are both not great. Donner's is better, but still uninspired. It makes me wonder if he would have gone with something else if he'd been able to finish shooting everything originally. And Lester's ending is flat out fucking stupid, and I just hate it. All right, on to ratings. IMDb, theatrical 6.8, Donner 7.6, Letterboxd, theatrical 3.3, Donner 3.6, Rotten Tomato critic score, theatrical 83%, Donner, no ratings were available. Rotten Tomato audience score, theatrical 76%, Donner 86%. Personal rating, theatrical 3.5 out of 5 stars, Donner 4.5 out of 5 stars. These really are two completely different cuts of the same movie, but if I could watch the Donner cut forever and just never see Lester's again, I'd be good with that. All right, everyone, thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Bye now.